event. Can you say this one more time? Thank you everyone for coming to our event. Our team is so heartened to see registrants from 18 states to meet Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Ed Humes for his 17th book, To Total Garbage. So we want to know you a little bit. By the way, we're going to get quite demanding today. We'll have quite a few asks to the attendees. Number one, please rename yourself. Put your state after your name. We want to know where you're from. And number two, please type in the chat your one environmental reason why you are here. I mean, if food waste bothers you, just type down a food waste, or I'm sure there are some clean energy folks, transportation folks, or if you just want to improve your lifestyle, get greener, then you can put a lifestyle there. So let's do that in the chat. We want to get a general sense why folks are here, where you are, that kind of thing. So I am Huayan If, co-chair of the California Zero Waste Committee. The zero in our name gives you an idea how powerful we are. Anything we do, we have to team up with other teams, and we tell them, hey, waste is an intersectional issue here. You need to work with us. So Ed, can you imagine how excited I was when I read your book, Total Garbage? You wrote a whole book of reasons for people like us, zero waste people. So I want to say this. I really love this phrase Ed wrote: waste is the engine driving unstoppable global crisis. So I thought I had to get Ed here and a whole bunch of other people to figure out how other people can collaborate with the Zero Waste Committee. So thank you so much for coming here. All the co-hosts, again, I'm so happy that we actually have 5 co-sponsors for this event. All other 4 have collaborated with us. So I want to start with Jim Stewart. With his committee, we have 2 joint campaigns. Organic waste. Hey, Nathan, can you show the slides?
Yep.
All right, so the Zero Waste Committee and the Energy Climate Committee, we have 2 joint campaigns: organic waste methane reduction and divestment. And throughout the year, we work on state bills and local issues such as climate action plans. So Jim, tell us about you and your committee. You're muted.
Okay, so I just want to say Huayan is one of the most amazing activists that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. She does volunteer work of many, many people and has a full-time job. So congratulations and thank you, Huayan. And if you want to go to the next slide, then what the Sierra Club California Energy Climate Committee is working on waste in the energy sector. And we have these 8 action areas that you can see on the screen here in terms of shifting from wasteful fossil fuels to local clean energy like rooftop solar, et cetera, et cetera. And that we have over 200 people on our email list. And if you send an email to Dr. Jim Stewart at Gmail, I'll add you to the list if you're a Sierra Club member. So thank you very much. Who's next, Huayan?
Next, naturally, will be Richard. I met Richard on the Energy Climate Committee, and his team does similar stuff in a very different approach. Richard, tell us about your team.
Thank you, Huayan. I really appreciate your work to organize this event. It is intersectional, as you pointed out. Our team is a national grassroots network team operating within the Sierra Club. We have members in 35 different states, and we are hyper-focused on supporting local actions that address the underlying causes of climate change. We work to support climate activists everywhere and do so by publishing a digital newsletter. We share a toolbox of implemented local actions from around the country, several of which are focused on eliminating waste. And we maintain a resource library to support and inspire local actions and offer limited financial awards to Sierra Club chapters or groups who are working on local climate actions. If you're interested in our work or wish to join our team, please send me an email at the address shown on this slide. And those links that I've shown on the slide are also accessible through the QR code on the slide. Thank you again, Hoyen.
All right, so from the climate emergency mobilization team, I met Mallory in New York. Actually, I interact with Mallory more often on Council of Club Leaders. Based on my observation, I would say Mallory is one of the young people that demonstrate new leadership that the 132-year-old Sierra Club absolutely need to transform itself. So Mallory, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Hoyen. Thanks, everybody. It's nice to be here, and what a wonderful event this will be. I am speaking on behalf of the Atlantic chapter of the Sierra Club, which comprises New York State. And one of the partnering or co-sponsoring groups or committees that is part of this event is the Atlantic Chapter Environmental Education Committee, which is a relatively new group of volunteers in New York who are trying to spread information and curiosity about environmental justice, primarily climate change, environmental issues, and particularly New York's unique ecosystem and what we need to do to protect it. So we do that by empowering at all levels of education. Education definitely never stops, but we focus a lot on youth, in particular through one program that we have running right now, which has been the recipient of one of the grants that Richard mentioned from the Climate Emergency Mobilization Team. So we're very thankful for that, where we host a Student Environmental Action Society, as we call it, or SEAS program, which engages high school students from across the state in virtual monthly sessions to learn about environmental justice, build community, fight climate anxiety, and then also put them in touch with local leaders who can give them an outlet for action when they feel like they're ready to do that and take the next step in their learning and engagement. So we've been able to engage a lot of young volunteers in issues such as those pertaining to education through reading different materials like we're going to talk about today, watching videos, listening to podcasts, and then also engaging in real issues such as engaging on social media, cutting down on our waste, and talking about the things that we can do and spread in our communities of young people and all members and all individuals alike. So if anybody wants to get in touch, I'll put my email in the chat, and then you can also use the QR code, which takes you to our website. There's also a sign-up form if you're somebody who's interested either as a student, as an educator, or just as a partner in a program like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Another person that works with a lot of youth is Patty. So Patty with QOC, she is not a Sierra Club member, does not run a Sierra Club entity, but local organizations like this, they are so important for us for our local work. A lot of times, actually, they are our family in the field. So Patty, tell us about you.
We're a longtime partner. We've advocated alongside Hoyen, and she is such a force, and we really appreciate being able to partner with her. So basically, QOC, we educate communities about the pressing challenges of climate change. I know a lot of awareness is out there, but people still are missing that link. What are the impacts? What are the real life impacts? And how it's still a pressing concern. So we do still share some of that awareness. But beyond that, we try to offer people resources for making better planet-friendly choices, whether it's in how they spend their funds, how they live, how they eat. So we try to provide practical solutions for sustainable living. We also do a cool block leadership training where we cover 8 sustainability topics, and a lot of students participate in that. We do a high school version of that. We just went to an event and I had parents tell me they want programs for their elementary kids because some elementary kids are very concerned about their future. So we're going to do some fun art contests, a little bit of dealing with climate anxiety for the youth to kind of give them more of a positive message and hope. So we do a lot of our activities through, so we do some virtual and some in person in Orange County. We try to make it fun and very social, give people a place to have community that care about the environment. So we do things like, you know, a vegan cook-off or practical things like electrification workshops or water stewardship workshops. And also things on community building, because if we can have concern for our neighbors, we can have concern for our global community as well. So if you're in the Orange County area, we invite you to engage with us. Any Zoom things that we do, everybody is welcome to attend those no matter what the area. And we started in Irvine as a program, and now we've expanded to other parts of Orange County. So we started an Instagram account called Cool Green Cities. And that's a good way to stay in touch with us. Thank you.
I want to, Patty, thank you. Thanks for joining us to co-sponsor this event. I also want to point out that there are actually a few government officials in the audience. Nathan, I think we can let the slides go now. Thank you. I know at least 2 people are from agencies. This is really special because people from the other side of the podium, when they come to talk to us, it's like, you know, wow, this is such an extra effort. Their perspectives are so important. So if you are with a government agency or you are elected official, please raise your hand so we know how many people are from government. Benita, Linda, okay. Okay, we have 2. I think we actually have 3. This other person is not raising her hand. That's fine. So now I'm going to put you 2 on the spot a little bit later. You need to tell us how we can work together. Then last but not least, I also want to give thanks to Nathan Chen. He is with California Transportation and Sustainable Communities Committee. He typically works as our Zoom master for large events. I didn't know he's out of the state. I dragged him into this. And so Nathan, thank you so much for volunteering when you're out of the state. Now, Ed, we haven't forgot about you yet. How about we run a poll before we officially start this? I want to see how many people have read any of Ed's 17 books. How?
Oh, and can you see how many people have responded also?
I see 58, 57 out of 81. We have 81 people here.
Yeah. Maybe we
Actually,
can end
83. I don't get your vote. I read 2 of his books.
Well, how about I can end the poll if it stalls out or once we get to 80%.
It's still growing. Okay, so while you're running the poll, I think we can speak. So, Ed, you apparently care so much about a whole large array of climate and biodiversity issues. In this book, this is your 17th book, and you wrote about a variety of macroplastics and the microplastics, and including those from fast fashion. You wrote about passive house movement, regenerative agriculture, of course, energy, transportation, and I want to point this out. Ed actually, sorry, folks, I want to paste this into the chat so people get to see. Do you see? Okay, I would just say that I would just have to read this. So Ed changed the 3 R's to 8 R's. They are rethink, repower, refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, recycle, rot. And while I was reading your book, I was thinking a lot. How do you live? I mean, you know, I really appreciate that you put the list of tips in the chapters at the end of the book. And I mean, you know, if we want to live a sufficiently sustainable lifestyle, there's just an overwhelming number of things we have to change in our daily life. That goes beyond calculating how to combine the cartridges, paper, plastics, things like that. So we have a load of questions for you today. Before we go there, I want you to give us an overview, how you got here, why did you write this book, you know, things like that. And the folks are welcome to put questions in the chat. Thank you. Ed, go ahead.
Oh, yes, that why are you writing this thing question. So I should say I haven't written 17 books about the environment and related issues. A portion of that 17 was I also have a long history of writing about crime and murder and related social issues. So I have a broad interest. Is why I became a journalist who's interested in science rather than a scientist working on the same thing. My attention span is apparently insufficient to pursue such a worthy career, but I do like telling stories. So that's why I do what I do. And I started in newspapers. I've been writing for magazines, including Sierra magazine, for many years. And I always liked writing for them. Back when it was a monthly, I was writing for them. So first I should back up and say good afternoon, everyone, or for some of you, good evening. Thank you, Hoyen and Sierra Zero Waste, California, and all the sponsors who are too numerous for me to review here, but much appreciated. Everyone here who's here to talk a little trash and a whole lot more. And I say that because when it comes to waste, it's not just what we throw in the bin. It's not just the plastic pollution that I could see in comment in the chat that many people present are rightfully concerned about, because that's just the most visible part of our vast universe of waste. So to address that question, with so many pressing environmental crises threatening our way of life, not to mention life in general, why write total garbage? And the answer to that is one of the main takeaways I hope that people who read the book and maybe who are in this conversation today get from it. And it's in the face of seemingly insurmountable, overpowering, disparate forces threatening us, whether it's climate disruption or pervasive plastic pollution or forever chemicals or toxic exposures, food waste, and the ceaseless pressure to extract ever more fossil fuels. In the face of all that, the first takeaway is we are neither helpless nor hopeless in the face of that seemingly hopeless situation. Our choices matter at the individual level and collectively at the campus level, community, and beyond, because it's not just our individual choices at that point. It's driving systemic policy. It's driving markets. And the point of total garbage is to show real world examples of this actually happening. People embracing solutions that can and are making a difference. And that leads to the second takeaway, and Hoyin mentioned that when she was reading the 8 R's. Basically, I tacked on 3 of them. And the number 1 R, before reuse and before refuse and before all those other R's, we have to rethink. And then we also have to repower. Those are the top 2 if we're concerned about waste, but mostly rethinking about how we think about these crises. Because this is the takeaway that gets us away from the doom scroll thinking, or of just focusing on one big problem and saying that we can't handle anything else. I'm going to channel all my activism into plastic pollution or all into climate. We can't do that. There's no time to do that. And the way to sort of get around that is to realize these many disparate crises are in fact all related, and they're all symptoms of our pervasive, persistent, and yet barely perceived wastefulness. We are the most wasteful civilization in history, unprecedented amounts of waste. Literally, and America leads the human civilization on that front. The most wasteful people ever to walk the earth, and ironically, a tiny bit of that is because Americans walk less than almost any other people on the planet Earth. So part of our wastefulness is related to that. So the connection of wastefulness to some of these environmental crises is obvious. The plague of disposable plastics is clearly a waste problem, and it's not just how we personally handle them, but the fact that we have basically held harmless the producers of a product that's very harmful. And simply the idea of a disposable plastic was inconceivable to the people who actually invented these materials in the early part of the 20th century. It was never about something you could throw away, because the whole attraction of the material was it defied the normal forces of nature. And so why would you then use it to be released constantly in nature? And we've never yet recovered or even confronted that question in a meaningful way. So that's an obvious waste problem. So how about these other things? How is climate, for instance, about waste? And I think actually this gathering here probably knows better than most that that's exactly what it's about. And the second most wasteful thing we do every day, and that I turn to in total garbage, is turning on the lights, running the fridge, waking up your laptop, charging our phones or our electric cars. In a civilization where 60+% of our electricity is created from burning fossil fuels, and the physics of that process is riddled with waste, makes our electricity, our generation and use of it, the second most wasteful thing we do every day. And it's ironic. Thomas Edison himself disparaged the process he helped introduce to the world in massive quantities, burning fuels to generate power. He said that was a terrible solution and a temporary fix until we figure out how to capture the sun, wind, and wave energy. Those were his big 3, his words. Towards the end of his life, he talked about this numerous times. And despite the advances we've made to realize that dream, we're still far from that goal. Our electricity is still dirty in most parts of this country and most parts of the world. And the physics of that mean that 2/3 of the energy we use in the form of electricity, or that we consume making that electricity, is wasted by the time it leaves the power plant, which means 2/3 of our electric bills are paying for waste rather than paying for the actual power we use. And that kind of framing, when you want to talk about a major cause of climate change, that we are saddled with a system that is riddled with waste, is a different way to talk about advocating something different. And as I said, total garbage is I try to focus on solutions because people are tired of being told there's a problem. We all know there's a problem. And so I looked for stories, real people, real communities that are tackling this in ways that we might not normally know about. And so for the renewable power piece of the waste story, I landed in the rural farm town of Morris, Minnesota. And I was just talking to a Midwestern university group about this because they were really excited that they were in the book in Minnesota. And Morris is a small, very conservative farm community. We're talking about, 20 plus points for Donald Trump in 2020. Not a place where you can really easily sell making big changes to deal with climate change. And yet they are right now probably one of the most sustainable farm communities in America. How does that happen? Why did it happen? And, this is now a town that has in large part made wind and solar their favorite crop. And I'm talking about solar fields with the panels elevated on pylons, so they're providing shade for cows in the pasture during the hot season. The local liquor store in Morris, their motto is "We chill your beer with the sun." They're very proud of that, and every public building in this town has solar. Some of them also have geothermal heating, and they're even running their public buses and school buses are electric. Remarkable partnership with the local university campus and the farmers. And their motivation is this saves the money. This eliminates waste. They're totally they have an amazing leading in that part of the state composting program for their ag waste and their food waste. And they talk about how this has made them, that this is a feature that gives them rural independence. It's lowered their energy bills. It's helped with their city budget, and particularly in terms of their electric bills, which had been getting unaffordable, are now some of the cheapest in the state. It's a remarkable transition, exactly the place we want our communities to be headed, and yet it's never been about climate change for them. It's never been about not, being opposed to fossil fuel use. It just makes sense for them. It's an entirely different conversation. It's the University of Minnesota Morris campus that partnered with the town to help realize this vision, talks about it being the big tent, that this is a conversation a sustainability officer from a liberal arts college can have with very conservative farmers and make progress in a way that seems like common sense to everybody involved. And the coolest thing they're doing now is Morris is in a federally funded pilot program for green ammonia manufacture using wind power, producing ammonia-based fertilizer and a fuel being used in farm equipment made right on the scene. And so that technology is a game changer for a major source of climate emissions in the agricultural sector and a major source of waste. Right now, California agriculture is supplied with fertilizer, ammonia-based fertilizer from, let's see where it is. Oh, most of it comes from the United Arab Emirates and Norway. And we could be making this stuff right in the Central Valley right now with renewable power. But we're not really talking about that as a way of ameliorating climate change. But if ammonia were a nation, it would be in the top dozen emitters in the world. It's that massive. So this is Morris, Minnesota. I see somebody's asking about this. Where is this at? I just wrote a essay for the Wall Street Journal about this. And the coolest part about Morris is it's spreading. Other cities in Minnesota are pursuing similar programs. and partnering with universities or with local regional planning agencies or others to get expertise. They all want that. The thing they keep talking about, we all want that liquor store that's powered by solar energy, and it's the gateway for getting into the renewable power universe. It's really cool. It's just a different kind of storytelling, but it gets those communities where we need all our communities to be, with a lowering of the intensity of their emissions. It's really cool. I said that was power is our second most wasteful thing we do. You probably know. I want to talk a little bit about the first most wasteful thing in the story I tell in the book there. It's, of course, you will probably, if we had a poll, I'd say, do you know what that is? And then everybody would probably say transportation. Of course, it's the most wasteful thing we do. It's in the US, it's the largest sector that contributes to climate disrupting emissions, but it's also just incredibly wasteful because of the physics of internal combustion, in which most of the energy, 80%, is wasted. All those emissions, 80% of them are, $4 out of $5 you spend at the pump is waste. It's just the nature of the beast. And thinking about the waste embedded in our transportation, the unnecessary cost, is a good way to have conversations about why we need to look for other solutions. And the town I landed in, probably hear my dogs in the background. The town I landed in it's called Peachtree City, Georgia, and it's 30 miles outside of Atlanta. It's has an unusual transportation system in which most of the residents there drive around in electric golf carts. They haven't gotten rid of their gas-powered vehicles, but they just use them less. And what they have figured out there is that they don't need an electric vehicle to go 300 miles because they hardly ever drive that far. Most of our trips are 3 miles or less, over 50%, and very few of them go over 50 miles. And the average American drives 32 miles in a day nationwide, vary state to state, but it's considerably less than the range of a Tesla everywhere in the country. And so they have small profile neighborhood electric vehicles that goes anywhere they need to go in most use cases. And this is an idea that has legs because they're incredibly inexpensive. They have no traffic jams in this community. They drive to work. It's a rite of passage to go to high school. You get to drive your golf cart. The high school parking lot in Peachtree City, Georgia has thousands of golf carts parked there because the kids all drive there every day in their little vehicle. And it is they haven't had a traffic fatality with this system in 20 years. It's pretty fantastic. Just before we started, a few of us were talking about traffic fatalities as being inconceivably numerous. Peachtree City has found a solution to that, a carbon-free solution. And every once in a while, when they need to drive a long distance, they unpark their gas-powered car and go do what they need to do. But that is such a tiny fraction of their transportation burden that this is an immense change in their transportation footprint, and they're happy. It's social. People just stop and pull over and talk to each other from golf cart to golf cart. It's not a retirement community. This is a thriving normal mid-sized city, and it has inspired others to try something similar, including the South Bay of California, of Los Angeles area, where the communities there, Redondo, Manhattan Beach, El Segundo, a few others, are joining forces to develop a transportation network for low-speed vehicles, like they're calling them NEVs, not electric golf carts, because it sounds cooler, I guess, or because government likes acronyms. But also for e-bikes and others, where they're given favored status on certain routes. And the hope is that in the South Bay communities, they'll show that people can get where they need to go in these low-profile under 40-mile-per-hour vehicles and like it and save money and also happen to reduce emissions. So it's a very interesting new take on the electric vehicle that basically says we don't need, for most use cases, a giant car with giant batteries in it to get where we need to be, the sort of good enough electric car. I just think that's fascinating. So those are two issues, transportation and electricity, where we don't normally think of waste as the core problem, but that it is possible to look at with that lens and come up with a different kind of solution or a different rationale for the same solution. My thesis in Total Garbage is that you could look at any sector of our economy or our daily lives and products, whether it's food, whether it's the untapped resource of our grass lawns, you know, and the nonprofit that's turning people's lawns into urban microfarms in the food deserts of Los Angeles, or cooking differently with induction rather than gas flames, and what that does for the restaurant business, how it advantages restaurants over gas cooking restaurants, and how it's a much more healthful choice for people at home, where having a gas stove can mean a 42% higher risk of respiratory ailment and childhood asthma. There's so many areas where this lens of waste can become a persuader to try something different. And I hopefully I assembled a number of stories and a number of solutions that anybody can embrace in Total Garbage. That was my goal, you know, to show people that it's not just what we use, or even mostly what we use, but what we waste that's killing us and killing our planet. So that's my probably overlong introduction. I'm sorry if I did go a little too long. I'm pretty passionate about this. So I'd like to open this up to questions and talk about what your concerns or you know, pursuits are to sort of deal with these issues.
I mean, that's the right message, I guess. You just got us really nervous right now. Good job.
Really
Ed.
nervous?
I actually did learn some of the stuff from what you just said, so I'm more nervous now. Patty had her hand up. Patty?
Oh yeah, I was just curious how you found these stories. You know, it sounds like it was all across the US. So how did you find these unique stories? Because some of these we haven't heard of, and you would think they would make the news. I would want to know, you know, if people in Peachtree, Georgia are running around in golf carts. That sounds interesting to me. So I was just curious how you found these stories.
Well, some of them I got through. So I don't know if anybody read, it said in Nepal they read my previous waste-related book, Garbology, but I made a lot of contacts working on that book, particularly in the university realm. It was a campus read at schools all over the place, and I met a lot of people. I'd go and talk or do events with them. So I developed a body of sources and also from my work for Sierra, of people who were interested in different aspects of these issues. So I relied on them. I relied on just basic journalistic research. Some of these stories had been in the local news coverage, like the Morris, Minnesota. I was aware of some of the things the university was doing there from my past research, and when I checked, I found out that they were a pilot for green ammonia and that all these other things were going on. It just seemed like a natural. I said, hey, can I come up and hang out with you guys for a while? And it was the same thing with Peachtree City, Georgia. I was on a double trip out there to spend time with the University of Georgia professor, MacArthur genius, Jenna Jambak, who's done, you know, groundbreaking research on plastic pollution, and is now working on a project with a number of other universities, including University of Santa Barbara, near where I live now, on the social cost of plastic pollution, for which really there's very little data. So we're going to be seeing some really cool things coming out of that. But while I was in Georgia visiting her, I also hung out in Peachtree City. I gotta tell you, I was very skeptical, but I wanted to check out this community that wasn't, some retirement community in Florida or Palm Springs where people were riding around in these things. And I went in like I think anybody would be that, golf cart's a terrible substitute for my car, it's so limited. And then I left there thinking, God, my car is a terrible substitute for a golf cart, because that's really how we drive most days. I mean, how many people here need to drive 300 miles every day on a charge? We're designing the solution to our fossil fuel-based traffic system by creating a vehicle for a use case that is literally less than 1% of how we drive every day. It's kind of, years ago I wrote about the juvenile justice system. I said, all this politicizing of young predators and juvenile murders, we were recreating the juvenile justice system for cases that represent less than 0.1% of the cases that juvenile court actually deals with. And now we're doing the same thing with transportation and with electric cars. Most of us will never need a Tesla or anything close to it. What we need are these short-range, affordable, and non-resource intensive golf carts and e-bikes. And yeah, we'll still need large format cars, but 60+% of American households have more than one vehicle. There's no reason why one of these shorter range, the electric equivalent of the Volkswagen Beetle couldn't be, our mainstay electric form of transportation. That was the best-selling car in America for like 2 decades. The Volkswagen Beetle was cheap. It was good enough to be America's favorite second car. And that's how we should be thinking about electric cars. So that's what drew me to Georgia. They have a really interesting solution that the rest of the world needs to know about. So I found it the old-fashioned way. I just hunted them down. It wasn't hard to find Crop Swap LA, this amazing nonprofit that is turning people's lawns into microfarms. This guy can feed 40 households a week with fresh produce and fruit from 1,000-foot square yard and use 8% that the grass used in terms of water consumption. It's phenomenal. Why are we, and he's struggling to get money to support this. It's, all the big nonprofits are so worried about food waste, like the, NRDC is very active in that space. This is the kind of program they should be getting behind. So, I found these stories because they needed to be found and they wanted to be found.
So we have 2 government people. We want to put them on the spot. That's Linda, and Linda is with Orange County Power Authority in California, and Vanita with City of Newton in Massachusetts. If I said
Welcome,
your name
Massachusetts.
wrong, please
Wow.
correct me. Yeah, I'm so excited to meet Vanita. Actually,
I'm a proud graduate of Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts. So happy to see you.
last year I got to know Newton because they adopted a big plastics ban. So I cannot believe that actually someone from the city is here. So I have a pretty general question. I mean, one thing that Edge talks to a lot of government people, and I don't know if any other type of entity can make the kind of massive changes like governments can do. On the other hand, that's precisely why it is so difficult. So I want to know from you that what should governments do to help cut waste, and also how the residents in our network can support this. I mean, a lot of times people think somebody else is going to go make public comments, And if you're there, then you see this is really painful for some of our elected officials sit on the dais. And this person is probably one single vote is going to be voted out. So progress is so hard. Progress depends on accountability. Accountability depends on transparency. So Vanita and Linda, please tell us what government can do to reduce waste.
Well, I'm just gonna speak for a couple minutes. Thank you, Hoyen. I just want to thank Sierra Club for all their support of local government initiatives, because you're right there and you've been really supportive in Orange County. But I do want to talk about what we're doing in Orange County, California. And we are the Orange County Power Authority. We are one of 25 community choice aggregators in the state of California. And we serve collectively over 14 million California customers. And basically, electric utilities need to be community owned, municipal owned. That would go a long way, and that is what Irvine in the Orange County, Irvine and Buena Park and Fullerton formed a joint powers authority to purchase their own energy. And because of that, we launched in 2022. We have 86% of our customers choose 100% renewable energy plan. And just to give you an idea, we have in our first, since 2022, since we launched, we have exceeded our own voluntary goals for renewable energy and the state's mandatory goals. We have 86% renewable energy purchased, and that has reduced over 2 billion pounds of CO2 emissions, which is equivalent of 221 gas-powered vehicles off the road. That's simply by customers making a choice for more renewable energy. But because we're a not-for-profit utility, and this is popular in California, but now spreading across the United States, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat if anybody wants to know more about community choice aggregation. But because we're not for profit, all of our profits go back into the communities we serve in the form of programs. We are currently building our reserves, but about to launch programs. I do want to share that we also apply for grants. So we're extra staff that is applying for grants, and we just got awarded, it'll be finalized in September by the CEC, but $1.2 million for building decarbonization direct install in low income areas in our 3-member cities. So that's going to be a huge trunk for helping people electrify their homes, put in heat pumps, hot water heat pumps, all reducing energy waste. But we also support, we just are allocating our second year of grants to local communities that are doing amazing things in emissions reduction space, from permaculture or gardening programs to people like Cool OC who are out there advocating for community sustainability in communities and supporting our businesses and supporting energy conservation, right? Versus just buying power. So that's what I would say. You cannot, we are supporting climate action plans by addressing the for-profit utility model. So that's what I'll say. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat if anybody wants more information.
You ended on energy conservation. I like it. Vanita, please go ahead. Tell us everything about what Newton has done.
Thank you so much for having me and putting this awesome program together. So I work for a local government. It's a suburb of Boston. I would describe it as a rather affluent suburb of Boston. So I feel very empowered in my role. My role is to run the trash and recycling curbside contract. We also have a recycling drop-off center. And I'm also empowered in my role to engage at the state level. So I sit on the board of directors for a nonprofit in the state called Mass Recycle. Most states have this type of organization that brings together local governments and businesses within the waste industry to really try and come up with creative and thoughtful and pragmatic policies that work for, I would say, everyone within the system. So it can't be kind of like too far outside the box in most cases, but I do think over time, we're slowly moving the needle on getting policies that are going to be beneficial. So some examples in other states have been extended producer responsibility laws that have been passed. There's been 5 states that have passed those. In short, if you're not sure what that is, or you're not familiar with that policy mechanism, this is how Europe and parts of Canada have had such high waste diversion and recycling and recovery rates. It creates a new paradigm, a kind of different way of working the system, where the producers of materials that go onto store shelves have to pay into a system that then they are also obligated to recover some percentage of the material that they're putting onto the shelf. So they pay into the system and then they use that money to fund a collection network. So there's 5 states in the country that have passed those laws. In Massachusetts, I work to pass those laws, but Massachusetts is actually shockingly behind the curve on some of the other states in the Northeast, and certainly on the West Coast, when it comes to like thinking really big picture and kind of changing and restructuring how we even think about managing waste. So it'll be really interesting to see those systems come online. Maine, Oregon, Colorado, California, and most recently Minnesota are the states that have passed this legislation. It's expected to be a 2 to 3 year rulemaking and regulation making process to get those systems off the ground. And what's already fascinating is that all of them are very different from one another. And so it's going to create this regulatory spider web that all of these brand owners, these producers, manufacturers of all of our consumer goods are going to have to contort into every single one of these regulatory systems in these states, which I think is actually going to be a very, I think it's going to drive industry into wanting one system, potentially nationally, so that they don't have as much inconvenience and kind of red tape that they have to hire for and abide by and cut through. So that's big picture thinking. At the local level, working at the City of Newton, I would say that there's been robust interest in certainly maintaining our recycling program, getting people educated, encouraging them to participate, but then we still face many, many barriers of just even having our school system follow kind of best practices. And I think that's very common and normal, but it really shouldn't be the norm. I would encourage all of you as activists, and I would certainly put myself in that category in my personal life, to really demand change and expect governments to set an example for how people should be kind of living their life, or, you know, things that should be easy, like going into City Hall and just seeing a trash bin next to a recycling bin and the recycling bin not having a plastic bag liner in it. Those should be the types of things that people should be expecting from their local governments. And again, I could go on, so I'll just end there.
Well, we can talk offline about EPR, extended producer EPR responsibility, and Ed and I had that talk to you. I'm sure Ed wants to talk to you about that too. Just for the record, Sierra Club opposed SB 54 in California.
Okay.
So I will just, I'm not going to, I also can go on and on. So we talked about Mallory. Mallory, do you have something to add?
Me?
Yes.
Sorry, did I raise my hand? Or...
No, you didn't. Okay, I just
Okay.
thought you probably have thought about, you know, how the two sides should work together for a long time. But if you don't
Oh,
want to
sure.
make
Yeah,
any,
absolutely. No, just the way I wanted to make sure I didn't accidentally go off mute errantly. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in my opinion, the sides complement each other. You know, I think all the comments that were made are really indicative of what we've been talking about, where we need systemic change. I see both in, you know, the world of environmental activism and also in the world of, you know, city government where I work in New York.
which city do you work for?
Yeah, so I work for the city of New York, and I'm a resident of Queens, New York, born and bred, and I've seen the city change a lot. Everything that I say is not, you know, spoken on as on behalf of the city, but sort of just my opinions coming from both sides of the field is that there's a lot of small changes that happen, but it's really hard in, at least in city government, which is my experience, to zoom out and take a look at the whole. I know that, you know, we were just mentioning things like plastic bag liners on recycling bins. I think there are so many examples of this where even with pretty large programs, you know, New York City is a very large city. There's a lot of projects and proposals and initiatives that go on daily that are quite large. But even those types of efforts and work sometimes are not integrated with the whole. And that can make it very difficult to make systemic changes and also to handle multiple threats at once, which is a big problem in a lot of our urban and rural spaces alike. Like New York City, for example, is extremely complex in that, you know, we have many different populations, we have a lot of space, we have 520 miles of coastline, which face, you know, numerous threats from things like sea level rise. We also have a lot of injustice from historical redlining. And so when we look at our threats like coastal storm surge from events like Hurricane Sandy, as well as things like extreme heat, which kills over 300 people a year, it's really hard to take projects one by one and say, okay, well, this is going to be a project to manage heat. This is going to be a project to manage inequality, or this is going to be a project for this or that. Because even with very large scale initiatives that are geared toward the right thing, you know, if you're not looking at the whole, you can often be exacerbating other things. So that's the part that I find most difficult, I think, in both sides of my work, is trying to sort of do everything at once without getting overwhelmed and also letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. But just some personal musings, definitely not speaking on behalf of everybody. There's a lot of great work that's going on in cities and towns alike.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all of you. So I think this is actually that's one of the reasons why I like this book. It puts a whole variety of subjects, issues into it. So let's read the poll here. So Ed, are you surprised about the results?
No, not at all.
It seemed to me so many people know about the garbology, but actually just as many people here have read Total Garbage. Wow. That is actually really cool.
Yeah, I'm very pleased.
So Ed, do you want to add something to what the three of them just said?
Yeah.
I think you have talked to so many different people in different states. You must have seen some good citizen initiatives, how we can help push.
Yeah, and there was also some things in the chat that seem to be related. But first, what Linda said about municipal utilities, what I was hearing is that is a really interesting sort of bifurcation in our electrical infrastructure, the investor-owned utilities versus the municipal ones. The latter, the publicly run and owned utilities tend to have, as a group, higher customer satisfaction and lower rates. They don't have the inherent conflict of interest that investor-owned utilities have in terms of investing in renewable infrastructure and cannibalizing their existing equipment, because they obviously don't have the shareholders to answer to and quarterly profits to realize that there's a different way of gauging success for a municipal utility. What I'm hearing from the National Research and NREL is that upgrading our grid in terms of replacing the existing wiring with materials that are more capable of operating at a greater capacity without actually building out the grid more, but upgrading what we already have in place could double the amount of renewable energy that the system is capable of handling. Because right now, one of the main bottlenecks for ramping up renewables, just one of many bottlenecks, is the fact that our grid really can't support as much power as we're capable of creating renewably. And that this upgrade will be a lot less costly than building all new infrastructure, and could solve a great obstacle to powering up renewably. Investor-owned utilities are highly resistant to this because the return on investment is not there for them. So to the extent that some states and communities have been looking at returning to a municipal utility system where it currently isn't that way, I think that could be a very positive evolution. But it's tough. They tried to do that in Maine and it was voted down. And it was a very expensive political campaign that the utility industry won, using their earnings from their, selling us electricity. So our current system is resistant to the change that we really need to make. So I'm with Linda in her comment that municipal utilities give us an advantage in terms of greening our electrical system. On the plastic, disposable plastic front, I do want to talk for a minute about producer responsibility laws, because it's a big part of the book. I look at Maine as the example because this is an EPR, at least in the legislation. The rulemaking is still going on, so we have to see how that turns out. But at least in its concept, it's an EPR done right. Because the industry isn't running the process. It's run by a public governance entity, a stewardship council, and then the stakeholders in that are not controlled by the plastic or industry or the brands that are affected by producer responsibility law. And that is key to having a successful EPR program. And the Maine legislature was particularly apt place to make Maine the first state to adopt an EPR for packaging and containers, because the legislators there are part-time. They're not full-time politicians. They all have, as they say, real jobs. And so the influence of lobbyists on them is perhaps not as great as is the case in other states like California. The other thing about Maine and their law was that it was a grassroots movement. This was not something proposed by their governor or by a legislator. It was proposed by a relatively small nonprofit called the Natural Resources Council of Maine, NRCM, and by one person there named Sarah Nichols, who's the main character in this portion of the book, who worked on this for 8 years. Going, Maine is a state of small towns and town councils, and she would go from town council to town council and finding an advocate. She'd go to those rubber chicken dinners at the Shriners or wherever, whoever listened to her, and her whole pitch was, our recycling costs are bankrupting our small towns. it's not our problem, but we're getting stuck with the bill. Why are the producers not paying for this supposed recyclability that none of us can actually make work? We're going to save taxpayers money if we start, making the mess makers responsible for their mess. And she had a very down-home message, I make my kids clean up their room when they make the mess. Why aren't we making the big brands clean up this mess that they've created? And that resonated, and it took years, but she had this idea where I can find, she called them my Marge. She had to find her Marge in every one of these little towns, and Marge was the name of her first volunteer community advocate in her first environmental campaign. And she said, the first thing I do is find my Marge. And she did. She had them all over Maine, and she showed them and others in communities, small business leaders, how to access the system, how to request to testify or to submit a letter to the legislature and to the right committees, and sort of help them become empowered to be part of the governmental process and to advocate for this law. And they found a legislative sponsor. It became a bipartisan bill. Of course, the beverage industry and the plastics industry said it would be disastrous. It would kill jobs. They introduced alternative legislation where they would run the process, but they lost, and the Marges won. And the governor signed that bill in 2022, the first in the nation, and it unleashed the floodgates for other states. Not all of them are keeping the, holding fast against having the fox guarding the hen house. California, unfortunately, seems to be allowing that. But Maine's is showing us how individuals and members of a community can exercise power and have a model piece of legislation passed that has the power to really change the ever rising amount of plastic pollution we're facing, because right now manufacturers face no consequences. The polluters do not pay. And being saddled with the bill, and the other key to Maine system is they don't care if something is labeled recyclable. They want it actually recycled, and that's the requirement. Something actually, the onus is on producers once these new rules kick in to recycle, not to label something recyclable. And right now we're in a world where everything's recyclable, but very little is recycled. 6% of our plastics nationwide. So I think this is the only thing that can stem the tide of plastic pollution, but it has to be done right. And I think Maine offers that model. Hoyin's told me some very disheartening things about what's going on with California's law, and that needs to be covered more. And I'm going to try and see if I can make that happen. So we can talk about that out of the meeting. But
yes, we can talk about that.
And there's a question that came up in here. Well, what about plastic pollution? Is there, and this is really interesting. This is from Barbara. Is there any hard data on the dangers of plastics, microplastics in humans? And someone, I don't know if Patty at Cool OC is referencing the same study that I've seen, but there's experiments in several independently done research projects with laboratory mice showing that accumulations of nanoplastics in their bodies tends to concentrate in a number of organs, including the brain, and that it seems to cause symptoms that resemble Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. So this is still an emerging field, studying the impact of ingesting microplastics and nanoplastics, but it's certainly cause for alarm that this could well be the next asbestos in terms of exposure, except it's even more ubiquitous. We're all imbibing plastic every day in our drinking water and our food. And if you drink water out of plastic bottles, you're consuming 100 times as much plastic particles than if you drank your water out of a non-plastic bottle. So it's the information that's emerging on our exposure with unknown, but common sense tells us that imbibing a fossil fuel related substance and the chemicals associated with plastics into our bodies is not going to end well for us, and probably already is not ending well. So that is another messaging imperative when we want to talk about getting rid of plastic waste, that the public health, the very real individual health consequences that might be coming along for the ride with these convenient packages really needs to be part of how we convince people that they need to make different choices, I think. So, okay, I think I covered most of the issues.
Nathan, do we have another question in the chat from, say, a consumer that's not about the plastic, or householder that's not about the government advocacy?
Oh, there was one about transportation. Want to talk about that one?
Yeah.
Ed,
I want to save the last question. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go with
You're running the show. It says, did you ever come across any stories of cities in America that successfully reduced driving miles? What strategies did they employ that were successful? That's really interesting, because the Peachtree City example isn't necessarily reducing miles. It's sort of changing the way people are traveling those miles. And so I think those are two related but different questions. But in terms of getting people out of their cars, the city I'm most familiar with, because I lived there for 3 years, is Seattle, which more people commute to downtown Seattle via public transit than drive. Because they get there faster, because it's cheaper, and because it's more pleasant. They just have created a really user-friendly alternative to getting in the car that actually is preferable for most people. And that's a real success story, because their mass transit systems are relatively new. It's not like the legacy systems of New York City, the subway systems there. This is one that's primarily driven by a rapid ride bus system, where the buses have special lanes. And actually, I loved riding on that bus and getting downtown by all those cars parked in traffic, in my little red bus lane, big red bus lane. And I mean, it definitely could be done. But I think the more important question, and the less expensive alternative, is just get people to change their means of transportation, whether that's an e-bike or a real bike, or actually, since half our trips are under 3 miles, finding ways to encourage people to walk their kids to school instead of driving them if they have a neighborhood school, or ride their bikes to school. Like, in generations past, that was normal. Now it's unusual. And making that kind of a new cultural inducement for communities with it's habit and custom that makes us resistant to that, not because we couldn't actually do it. So finding ways to reach people where they live. Sometimes you have to provide a carrot. Sometimes you have to provide a little stick to make it more attractive. Maybe making it harder to make that drop off at your kid's school in cars, and then make it easier to just walk instead. Most people still live close to the schools that their children attend, a majority of us, and that would be one good way to get back to a non-car method of covering some of those short distances. I don't know. It'd probably get you voted out of office to try it, but it sure would be worth trying.
All right, so I'm going to ask a different question. That will be the last question, and then that will be the last Q&A question. Then we have a group exercise. I want to talk about AI. So AI is increasing part of our life, and our opponents, the industry opponents, have the resources to run AI-powered campaign to counter our grassroots campaigns. And, you know, journalists like you, Ed, are so helpful for us. You're one of our best allies. And also AI-generated content is threatening you folks in your field. So have you thought about anything we can do before it's too late? How can we up our game?
Oh God, I'm not the probably the right person to answer the question about that particular emerging technology. So I'm gonna pass on that one. Maybe someone else present has something
then
better.
let's go for a simple one. How can we support writers like you? I mean, you know, these days people are still writing books when, you know, social media is such a thing in our life. So how can we support people like you?
Well, you know, there's a number of ways, but one is to, I mean, I depend on people who are actually rolling up their sleeves and doing some of these things. I mean, each of the people I write about in Total Garbage are doing the hard work of whether it's research or activism or engineering, and they're sharing their stories with me. In some cases, they reached out to me and so told me that you're interested in this. Here's what we're doing about renewable energy and food waste in our community. Are you interested? And so share your stories. If not with me, with someone else. And our brains, and maybe this gets to your AI question too, because our brains are hardwired for storytelling. You know, going back to, you know, the cave painters, that's how we learn, and that's how we connect with people, through storytelling. You know, whether it's campfires, or in newspapers, or in books, or in conversation. We're always telling a story, whether we know it or not. And that's a human connection, and it's not something easily replicable by technology. And the heart of storytelling is both finding something familiar and yet learning something new about it. And each of you present, you're all engaged in important work in the environmental space, in government, and sharing your insights and your stories is the best way you can help people like me do what they're doing. And you know, sometimes I might say, well, you know, that's not really something I see with I could add anything to, but why don't you try and talk to so and so? I know a lot of people who do this, and I always try to connect them to a good story if it's not the story I can tell. So just reach out.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, then somebody said, and also you can start by buying and reading my books. Yes, but it would be crass for me to say that. But somebody said it in the chat. So I would love you all to read Total Garbage and help me write the next edition and add to it and see. God damn it, Ed! Why didn't you put this in here? And help me make it better. That's true.
Yeah, this is really what we have been hearing from our other guest speakers, journalists. They want the stories from us. So thanks for the reminder. So we're almost at 6:21 now, 9:21 for the East Coast people. I would put one last group exercise here. So this will require you to type in the chat, everyone.
Uh-oh.
As a consumer, an environmentalist, or a citizen, for the rest of the week, what's the one new thing you will do to help fix our waste problem? Please type your answer in the chat. We want some inspiration, we want new ideas.
Hmm. Oh, for some reason I can only send a direct message. This is weird. Well, I tried to type in take up home gardening, but I'm always sending a direct message to one person. I can't seem to get in the chat. It's weird.
Do you see a pull down menu in the chat? And it should say meeting group chat.
No.
This is wonderful. So Ed, why don't you actually, since you actually cannot type, why don't you read? Read some of these actions, please.
Yes, I will. Buy all clothes secondhand. Yay, thrifting. Collecting edible wild plants instead of buying things at the grocery that are packaged and transport. See how my local government can better model. Oh, should I say who's saying this? Nathan Chan says, see how my local government can better model sustainable behavior for our citizens. Barbara, I'll have a sit-down chat with our mayor pro tem about banning single-use plastic usage on our beach. Christina Lee Escudero, stop eating the snacks in one-time use plastics. Yay. Gary Griffith, talk to my neighbors about ways to share transportation, share food production, promote municipal utility grids, and generally all the innovative ways local communities are addressing waste. Martin Bonin, I am a teacher. We try to change the school culture of trash on campus, especially with waste food, single-use plastics, and that's not easy to change habits. Yeah, and also sporting events. They're terrible waste makers. Chris Berger, my family has been at zero waste since 1992. Part of that time included 2 teens. I'm always telling our story. I love that. Jack Jackson, avoid plastic containers and bottles. Patty Okulo C. By the way, is rot the composting part? The answer is yes. I just needed an R. Ron Martin, press ore, plastic, current, and legacy into plastic timber with the added advantage of helping preserve our old growth forests. Yeah, you know, Seattle has this company called Ridwell that does door-to-door collection of problematic material like disposable plastics. And one of their main, they're a source for companies that do make plastic lumber like Trex, because connecting people with that solution to the source is hard. And so this particular company, which has just expanded to Los Angeles, is from there. origins in Seattle is trying to make that connection. So that's kind of cool. Daryl Downing, encourage extended family to RRR. I'm not sure what that means. I'm with family from around the country this week. Daryl, what do you mean? What's RRR?
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Oh, okay. The original three R's. All right, gotcha. Richard Greenwood, ride my electric bike more instead of the car. Awesome. Linda Kramer, remember to bring my own containers every day in my car. That's my constant battle. Sandy Emerson, I will look into electric golf carts. Awesome. A lot of communities are allowing them in certain areas now. So that's cool. JJ Morris, I will wait for the farmer's market and not buy any produce wrapped in plastic from Trader Joe's. Awesome. And if I could add to that, make sure you bring your own bags to the farmer's market, because a lot of them, unfortunately, will try and give you a plastic bag. Heidi Melander, support school district in getting reusable trays for daily lunch, delivery from offsite. Awesome. I like that. Renee Kasuta, do more with less. And in a similar vein, oh, it just changed. Sorry.
Buy less. I
Less.
love
Buy
that.
less. There you go. There's numerous buy lesses in there, and that's really cool. And Grace Wang is finally going to buy that e-bake I've had my eye on. Awesome. Yeah, shop the sales. They're giving us all away. Hoyin, as a consumer, oh, this is the question. Okay. All right.
All right. Have we got all the question the solutions actions read already?
I think there's more have been added while I was reading. Shop at Farmers Market from Wes Chang, Jenny A, and any ideas to deal with grocery waste, plastics, especially aside from reusing plastic bags?
I love that answer, growing your own food.
So it's a question. What else besides not using plastic bags?
Yeah, then the answer is to grow your own food.
Yes, and also if you can find something you want packaged in something other than plastic, whether it's glass or unpackaged because it's just loose in the produce aisle, or the thing is, if you shop for non-processed foods, you end up with a lot less packaging too, and a lot more health in your grocery basket. So agree, buy less, and avoid all plastic. This is Louise Lipsey saying the same thing. Unfortunately, recycled plastics often contain even more toxic chemicals than virgin chemical. This is true. It's really sad. The recycling industry itself is the source of plastic pollution and materials that one of the main reasons why we don't effectively recycle food containers into more food containers is because of this toxic accumulation in the recycling process. It's kind of the plastic equivalent of biomagnification. Ed, I would love to see you combine a murder mystery with climate change. Some learn through entertainment, sort of like the movie Don't Look Up. Cool. I've often thought, how can I merge the two? So anybody out there got a good climate murder story for me, or death by PFAS or something, let me know, and I'll see what I can come up with. I like that.
All right, very cool. So it's 6:31. I think I would like to thank everyone for coming here, and in particular, Ed, you're so busy. You're speaking around the country, so we're very flattered that you would come here to join us.
I'm so happy you invited me. This is fun. I love this.
All right. We will follow up with the folks, and coming up, we probably will have some call for actions. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you all for coming. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hoyan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Great chat.
Very
Thanks,
nice.
Gwen.
Bye.